Kelly. If you're here and you want to sit at a table, I see that there are empty seats at some tables. You can walk up if you want a place to write down. I know some of you are filling in the overflow. That's fine. But if you want to do that, there are definitely empty seats. So if you want to move, find a way. These people are not going to hurt you, I promise. They'll probably be glad you come and sit down with them. Second thing I want to tell you about is one of the things we do for Dr. Kelly for doing this is take up a love offering. And so anytime this week, if you want to give towards that, just you can give online and put it's for Winter Bible Study love offering, or put Dr. Kelly love offering. If you want to give a check or cash, you can put it in the box with an envelope that just says Winter Bible Study, Bobby Kelly love offering. This is a way for us to bless him for his time and investment in us as he teaches here. It's 5:30. It's actually 5:29. But I don't want to take any more time away from Dr. Kelly because he'll use it against me at some point in the future. So we're going to turn it over to you, Dr. Kelly. Welcome him this evening.
You better move that one. Good evening. Y'all just go ahead and eat. Don't worry about me. Just enjoy your food. Go back for more cookies. And don't worry about me. I don't need to eat tonight. Well, it's good to see you all on what a beautiful day it ended up to be. A little chilly to start today. But we've got a little work to do over the next few days. So we've got Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. So let me give you kind of the big picture about what we're going to do on each night. Tonight, I'm going to, my goal is to cover those 7 absolute I am sayings. That's where Jesus just says, I am. So that means we can't just like pull out the I am and just study the one individual little saying, or else all 7 of them would be identical. But they're not. They're all in a particular context. And they only make good sense in that context, which is going to require us to look at several, when we get to chapter 8, there are 3 I ams there. We're probably going to have to really look at that whole chapter pretty closely. So in some places, we're going to have to study a whole chapter just to get everything set so we can understand the I am that's found there. So tonight, it's going to go like this. There's one in chapter 4, 26, somewhere around in there, but it's the woman at the well story in chapter 4. That's going to be the first one we're going to look at. And you've got a handout also to kind of help guide. I saw them on that table in the back. So you can see I've got 5 on the front of the page. You flip it over, 6 and 7. That's what we're going to try to cover this evening. So you've got the first one is in John 4:26. That's the one with the woman at the well. Then number 2 is in chapter 6, verse 20. Now, there's another I am in that chapter where he says, I am the bread of life. That's later in chapter 6. But earlier in chapter 6, when he walks on the water, he walks out to them, they're scared, and he says, I am. So that's the second one. The third one is in chapter 8, and also the 4th one and the 5th one. There are 3 of them. 3 I ams where he just says I am in chapter 8. And they sort of climax when Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. Now, this comes in conflict with the Pharisees. Then you flip the page over, and I actually touched upon this one this morning because it seemed to play into the I am the way. But when Judas betrays me, you will know I am. In chapter 13, when Judas actually betrays him, when he says Judas is going to betray me, there's an I am there. He says, when you see that he betrays me, you'll know that I am. And then the last one is in chapter 18. This is the one where he's just had that upper room with his disciples through chapter 17. And then in 18, he goes out to meet his accusers. And this is a large contingent, Roman military people, temple guards, and he goes out to meet them. And you'll see he's very much in charge of that encounter in John's account of his arrest. And when they say they're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, he says, I am. And he says that twice. and on the second time, they fall down. An army just collapses in front of him. I mean, 600 plus military. So that's what we're going to try to cover tonight. That's the goal, is to get through those I am. So you got your handout. So open with me to John chapter 4. And let's start with this story of Jesus encountering a woman at the well of Sychar. And she happens to be a Samaritan woman. So let's pick it up at John chapter 4, verse 1. When Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard he was making and baptizing more disciples than John, though Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went again to Galilee. He had to travel through Samaria. And the language there is important because Jews typically would not go through the province of Samaria because of just tensions between Jews and Samaritans. I'll come back to that in just a moment. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the property that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, worn out from his journey, sat down at the well. It was about noon. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. "Give me a drink," Jesus said to her, because his disciples had gone in to town to buy food. "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" she asked him. And then John adds, "For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." So there's several interesting things here I think maybe help us capture this moment. First, let's think about Jesus encountering a woman at the well. Can you think in the Old Testament of scenes where a man encounters a woman at a well, and the result of it ends up betrothal or marriage? Like Genesis 24. In Genesis 24, Abraham is about to die. He needs to find a woman for his son Isaac. She needs to be a good woman because, this whole big promise that God gave to him centers around having descendants and the descendants being great. So he wants to make sure this descendant, Isaac, the chosen one, marries a good woman so they can have children. And so at the very end of his life, he sends one of his servants to Nahor, which is ancestral land. He says to his servant, "Whatever you do, don't let him marry a Canaanite woman. You got to find Isaac a wife that among people that will believe that Yahweh is the one true God." So he sends his servant, and he takes 10 camels and gold, and he's really going to try to make a big splash if he finds the woman he's looking for. That'll be a good woman for Isaac. So he's got these 10 camels, and as he approaches the town that Abraham sent him to, where the family lived, he said, "When I get here," he prayed, "when I get here, the first woman that I encounter at the well that gives me water and then waters these 10 camels, I'll know that's the one." And it worked to perfection. Rebecca comes out there to the well. She gives him a drink. She volunteers to water the camels. She was beautiful. She was a virgin. It was perfect. She's the one. Now she has a brother, Laban, who will come into play in a subsequent well scene, but that's the first one. So it results in Isaac and Rebekah's wedding. That's the beginning. Then in chapter 29, Jacob is looking for a wife. He goes to the same area, and there he meets Rachel. Now, her father is Laban. See, this is the same family. And, of course, he falls in love with her, says he'll work 7 years for her. Laban pulls a switcheroo on him and gives him Leah, which he doesn't discover until the morning after they consummated the marriage. It's a terrible event there that Laban pulled on him. And then he works 7 more years for Rachel. But it starts at a well. Where do you think Moses meets Zipporah? At a well in Exodus 2. And so you've got these stories. Zipporah is his wife, by the way. have these well scenes, and a wedding or an engagement grows out of it, and then a wedding. But this is not an engagement scene. Jesus is not getting engaged to the Samaritan woman. But it is a picture of hospitality. And in all those stories that I just mentioned to you, hospitality plays a role in it, even if it doesn't lead to engagement. So if you remember the prophet Elijah, who encounters the widow of Zarephath, and when he does, he asks her, "Give me a drink of water." And she does. And then she's got very little oil or wheat for bread, and she's running out. She was going to make one last meal for she and her daughter, or she and her son. And Jesus says, "Well, make me a little bread." She does, and it multiplies, and she's saved. He ends up dying. Elijah raises him or resuscitates him from the dead. That's a good parallel to this. He meets this woman who's from Zarephath. She's not Jewish. So the prophet Elijah meets this woman from Zarephath and asks for a drink of water. She provides it. It's very much like Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman. These are hospitality scenes in the Old Testament. Hospitality is really important. Somebody's a host and somebody's a guest. And you see it in other places as well, like God and two messengers visit Abraham, and then that's Genesis 18. And Genesis 19, the two messengers go on and visit Lot, and he's willing to turn over his virgin daughters to them, to an angry mob, in the service of hospitality, of caring for these guests for which he is host. So they're pretty serious about their hospitality in the ancient world. And that comes into play here when Jesus encounters this Samaritan woman at the well. The surprising part of this moment is that she's a Samaritan and he's a Jew. One, that a Jewish person's even traveling through this territory. Two, that he would encounter a woman. That's also a part of this, but it's not as big as the Samaritan Jew issue. But it's also a strange man who's a Jew encountering this woman that he doesn't know. But what is it about Jews and Samaritans that we learn here that Jews don't normally go this way? Because it's verse 9, Jews do not associate with Samaritans. What's up with that? Well, there's a long history. It's like 700 plus years of conflict between Jews and Samaritans. And it goes all the way back to when the Assyrians, like 722 BC, so that's 722 plus years from this moment when Jesus encounters this woman and he says Jews don't normally associate with Samaritans. It all goes back to that point when the Assyrians were kind of the bully on the block in that part of the world. And it's causing lots of trouble between the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, Syria. But they eventually, because of the northern kingdom's disobedience to God, they eventually fall to the Assyrians. They deported many Israelites out of the northern kingdom to Assyria. But the Jews that were undeported, those that were left in the northern kingdom, then they settle Assyrians in the land. So, of course, they end up mixing together, marrying, intermarrying, having children. Now, how do you think Jews who would have nothing to do with these Assyrians who had settled in that northern kingdom, what do Jews in the southern kingdom think about those marriages and the offspring of those marriages? They saw them as no longer Jews, even though they would have been partially Jewish, and they saw them as idolaters. They were now mixed in with these Assyrians and Assyrian gods, and they worship pagan deities. And so they saw them as ethnically not being clean or pure, and religiously now they're not clean or pure. And then over the 700 plus years to get us to here, there's many other stories that increase that conflict. There's a lot of bloodshed between the two groups. I'll give you one example. She's going to mention later in the story, at verse 21, Jesus told her, "Believe me, woman, an hour's coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain or in Jerusalem." The mountain is Mount Gerizim. Now that's in Samaria, and that's where Samaritans had built a temple to worship because they did not feel welcome, and they weren't welcome at the temple in Jerusalem. So you had these partial Jews worshiping on Mount Gerizim and the temple they'd built, and then you had the temple in Jerusalem. Well, one Jewish group that won some independence for a particular period of time for Israel, called the Maccabees, one of their leaders was named John Hyrcanus, about 100 BC. He goes to that Samaritan temple at Mount Gerizim, takes troops, and he tears their temple down on Mount Gerizim, the Samaritan temple there. Now, that's the kind of action that just increases tension. Now, we have tensions in America, ethnic tensions, racial tensions, but we've got like 250 years of history. We're talking 700 plus years of history, and a lot of it involving conflict, bloodshed. And so when we come to this moment, here's Jesus, a Jewish man who is traveling through Samaria, something Jews didn't like to do, and he encounters a Samaritan woman, and he asks her for a drink of water. Now, there's a lot of back and forth conversation between them, but at the heart of it is she's trying to figure out who he is. He's a stranger. And she does talk to him. I can't see anywhere in the story where it actually says she gives him water to drink. Although you might infer she does, because he seems, it seems like they're getting along just fine in their conversation. But the big issue becomes, who are you? So let's pick it up at verse 9, or I already read that, verse 10. Jesus answered, "If you knew the gift of God and who is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you'd ask him, and he would give you living water." So she was the host and he was the guest. Now he's suggesting maybe he could host her and she'd be the guest. He can give her water. He requested water. Now he's talking about giving her water, and it's living water. "Sir," said the woman, "you don't even have a bucket, and the well is deep. Where are you going to get this living water?" I mean, you'll notice Jesus is often taken very literally with what he says. So literally, he's talking about giving her a drink of water, and she scratches her head and says, "But you don't even have a bucket." And Jesus, I think, is too nice to roll his eyes at her, but he probably thinks, I don't need a bucket for the kind of water that I'm offering you. But it's just evident she's not tracking exactly what he's talking about. Verse 12, "You aren't greater than our father Jacob, are you? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and livestock." So this is the location, is Jacob's well. This is at a place called Shechem. You can read about it in like Genesis 30 through 33. But Jacob is associated with all of this area because this was the area that Jacob's descendants inherited, the 12 tribes. And Joseph is particularly associated with this area because his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, inherited the territory that is now Samaria. So Joseph will sometimes come into play when you're talking about the Samaritans, and of course Jacob's well. And let's see, I lost my place there. Verse 13, Jesus said, "Everyone who drinks from this water will get thirsty again. But whoever drinks from the water I give him will never get thirsty again. In fact, the water I give him will become a well of water springing up in him for eternal life." "Sir," the woman said, "give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to come back to draw water." Now she's seeking hospitality from him. "Go call your husband," he told her, "and come back here." "I don't have a husband," she answered. "You've correctly said, 'I don't have a husband,'" Jesus said, "for you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. So what you've said is true." So he totally, call her out. He definitely identified her situation. You've been married 5 times, and the man you're married to now is not your husband. Now, how could a stranger Jewish man meeting her at the well know that? Who is this man? She asked the question back there in verse 5, in verse 12, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" So that was the first question of identity. "Now I see that you are a prophet," because he was able to tell her things about herself that he otherwise couldn't have known. Verse 20, our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you Jews say that the place to worship is in Jerusalem. And Jesus told her, "Believe me, woman, an hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." He's sort of reorienting the whole idea of worship is not going to be centered in a particular location, but you can worship God in spirit, by the power of the Spirit, and truth, in truth that is aligned with who God is. And you don't have to do that in any particular location. That's where he's moving. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, because salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. Yes, the Father wants such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, who's called the Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Now, we've had a long conversation here. I've been talking for, 20 minutes or something about this little scene. Feels like it's taken us a while to get down to the I am. You might have been thinking, where's the I am? I think John is sort of building the suspense here for the I am saying. There's a lot of conversation back and forth here, and quite a bit of it is repetitive. It's like we're building the suspense here before we reveal the hero, or who the hero is in this moment. I was trying to think of a book or a film where it does that. It really builds the suspense, and you don't see the main character, and you don't know who he is until later in the story. Well, it's kind of a little bit of that playing out here. Well, here it is. When he comes, that is the Messiah, he will explain everything to us. And Jesus told her, I am the one speaking to you. I am. That's it. That's number one. Ego eimi. I am the one speaking to you. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, almost all English translations handle this poorly. You know, I'm like an armchair quarterback here, but it's true. English translations want their translation to be good, smooth English. So, I am is not particularly pleasing English. Sounds like something's missing. So, English translations where it just says I am will say, I am he, it is I. And those are fine English phrases. The problem is it obscures the I am, which connects Jesus to Yahweh in the Old Testament. And if you can't see the connection, then the translation has done you no favors. Now, I bragged on Brandon Smith this morning, my chair at Hobbs, my boss, who was the editor of this CSB. And so I can go right down to his office and say, what were you people thinking here? And I can't tell you how many times Brandon says, man, I fought for that. But it's a committee. And others on the committee had reasons for wanting to do it this way or that way. And so somebody wins and somebody loses in those conversations. But I think I would have threatened to quit the committee if I'd been on it, on these. I would have leveraged everything on just say, I am the one speaking to you. Here it's I, the one speaking to you, am he. You can hardly put I and am together there. That's the climactic moment that everything is built towards. So this I am, to me, suggests, well, it's more than suggests, it announces that Jesus is the Messiah, sent by the Father and one with the Father. Now, I'm going to, if you look on the handout that I gave you, that's one. And now, you see these 3 bullet points there? Here tonight, I get to really emphasize what I had to run through this morning. And that's how these connections to Yahweh in the Old Testament that Jesus is making sort of make that connection a little more clearly. So I'm not going to do Exodus 3:14 again. That one's a well-known passage. I am who I am. Tell them I am sent you. The I am is a Yah, and we get Yahweh from that stem. So the name Yahweh is built off of the to be verb in Hebrew. It just means I am. Now, that's a beautiful statement of just existence. If your name is I am, that means you exist. That's what God is declaring. I am. It's a statement of existence. But it's a little bit more than that. I think you can see in that I am, not just existence, but self-existence. That God exists from himself and of himself, and God is in need of no one or nothing outside of himself. Not just existence, but self-existence. I am. God doesn't need any other people. God doesn't need any other thing. God didn't need us. He didn't suddenly decide, or, feel the need to create Adam and Eve because he felt like something was missing in his life, or that there was a hole in his heart and he wanted to share life with other people. There was nothing missing or lacking in God. God, in his own purposes, knows why he determined to create human beings in his own image, but he did. But it wasn't because he was lacking or missing in something. This is the nature of God, that God exists, and God exists in and of himself. And then, I also like that Exodus 3:14, it is, I am with you. It's not just that God exists, and not just that God exists of himself, but that God, he's promising to Moses there, I'm with you. I go with you in this endeavor, as I was with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Now, that's kind of the amazing thing about these, when you see God giving his name to Moses and saying, I am, and with you. That this God who always existed, who created everything that is, not just this planet and this solar system, whatever exists in the universe, he made it. It's big and expanding. That God promises his presence with Moses and with us. So that's the Exodus 3:14. Deuteronomy 32:39. I did want to actually read that one. So when we get near the end of the book of the law, Deuteronomy being the last of the 5 books of the law, we get to this statement. This is a Song of Moses, actually, but in it, we hear this about God. Verse 39. See now that I alone am. Now, your CSB is going to say, I am he. I just go through when it says he and rub it out with a pencil. So I'm not even tempted to see it there. It's just, I alone am. I am alone. There is no God but me. I bring death and I give life. I wound and I heal. No one can rescue anyone from my power. And if you look at what comes before, it's really comparing these false gods that people tend to worship with the one true God. So it's a statement that he is alone God. I am. Now, he does not use the same phrase. The Hebrew does not use the same phrase there as it used in Exodus 3:14. It's a different Hebrew phrase. This one's more fun to say. Ani hu. Ani hu. You can say it. Go ahead. Ani hu. You just said in Hebrew, I am. Or you could say I am he, I guess, to smooth it out, but I wouldn't, not here. Now, here's why that's important. There's a Greek version of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament. It's called the Septuagint. It's often interesting to see how does that Greek translate that Hebrew. And it uses 2 Greek words, ego, eimi. The same 2 Greek words that are used to translate the Yah from Exodus 3:14. So it's 2 different Hebrew phrases, but in the Greek version of the Old Testament, it uses the same 2 Greek words, ego, eimi. You know what John records Jesus' words as, ego, eimi. The connection's clear. And by the time we get to the last one tonight, I think you'll agree with me. Yep, I think that's what Jesus is saying, and people recognize that he's saying something radical, even dangerous, to be claiming that you're Yahweh, or you somehow have this divine identity. Now, the third bullet point is Isaiah 40 through 55. This is the third place. You got the Exodus 3:14, you got the Deuteronomy 32:39, and you've got these passages in Isaiah, and it's in the section 40 through 55. Now that's this end of Isaiah, suffering servant passages. You might recognize like Isaiah 53 is part of that. He was wounded for our transgressions. He bore our sorrows. Isaiah 53, often seen as a messianic passage. It's part of that. It is like the part of Isaiah where it looks to God making all things right and bringing to completion his final work in the world, and doing it through his servant, who is described in Isaiah chapter 40 through chapter 55. Well, there's quite a few I ams in there. Just take a shot, how many? Always 7. Guess 7. It's the right guess. A number of completion, of perfection. And there's 7 of them here in Isaiah, between Isaiah 40 and Isaiah 55. You've got 7 times where you got that anihu, the same phrases in Deuteronomy 32:39. 7 times. How many absolute I am sayings? How many with an image provided? Oh, now you're getting the idea. Just say 7. Yep. And how many signs in John chapter? There's 7. I just said, didn't I? Okay. There are 7 miracles in John, but they're not called miracles in John. They're called signs in the first 11 chapters. And you got the turning to water to wine. That water to wine at Cana is 1. You got the healing of a nobleman's son at the end of 4. You got the healing of a paralyzed person at the pool of Bethesda, paralyzed man at the beginning of 5. You got the feeding of the multitude and walking on the water. That's 5. That's 4 and 5. In chapter 9, he heals a blind man. Now, the climactic. What would be the hardest miracle to perform? Raising a dead. It's the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11. Just 7. Jesus did way more miracles than that, but John just gives you those 7. Something about that number. Oh, and he wrote the book of Revelation, right? He kind of likes 7s there too, doesn't he? Letters to 7 churches. You've got these cycles of 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. 7s are everywhere. And it's a number that indicates completion, perfection. So if you've got 7 signs of Jesus, miracles of Jesus, that points to something perfect about him and complete. If you've got 7 I am sayings, that says something about he is perfectly and completely the great I am. The numbers matter in Scripture. Now, you can't lose your mind over a number, but these numbers really do often bring a lot of symbolic value. So I'm going to go now to Isaiah 40. And the first of these is in chapter 41. They're listed there for you, but I just wanted to read them to you. So Isaiah 41, chapter 41, verse 4. Who has performed and done this? Calling the generations from the beginning. I am the Lord, the first and the last, I am. I marked through the he. But how about that language of the first and the last? Does that sound familiar? From the book of Revelation, we've got that language used both of God and both the Father and Jesus in the book of Revelation as the first and the last, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, to use Greek letters like they do in Revelation, like John does. But that's the first one. Doesn't that sound like a claim of Yahweh, of the one true God? Who's performed and done this, calling the generations from the beginning? I am the Lord, the first and the last, I am. And Lord, in these contexts, is Yahweh. Now look at 43:10. Isaiah 43, verse 10. You are my witnesses, this is the Lord's declaration, and my servant whom I've chosen, so that you may know and believe me and understand that I am. No God was formed before me, and there will be none after me. I am the Lord. Besides me, there is no Savior. I alone declared, saved, and proclaimed, and not some foreign God among you. So you are my witnesses. This is the Lord's declaration, and I am God. Also, from today on, I am alone. I alone am. And none can rescue from my power. I act, and who can reverse it? So that's 2. You got the one there in 10, and you got the one there in 13. Then look at 46:4. So this is going to be your fourth in Isaiah. This is one I've not told Brandon about yet, but we're really going to have a conversation about this one. The line in the CSB is, I will be the same until your old age. There's an I am in there, and you can't see it. So if he next time, I've told him I got to get on that committee next time when they revise it. Here's a better translation of that. Even to your old age, I am. And I will bear you up when you turn gray. I've made you, and I will carry you. I will bear and increase. That one has special significance to me at this stage of my life, especially the gray hair reference, right, Albert? Yeah. So that's 4. 48:12. Listen to me, Jacob and Israel, the one called by me. I am. I am the first. I am also the last. And then 51:12 is going to be our sixth one. I am the one who comforts you. Who are you that you should fear humans who die, or a son of man who is given up like grass? But you have forgotten the Lord your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth. Here's a picture of the I am as the creator. And then Isaiah 52:6. Therefore my people will know my name, and therefore they will know on that day that I am who says, here I am. So when Jesus says, ego eimi, he is tapping into this language of Yahweh in the Old Testament. He is making a claim about his identity. This is who he is. He is not just Israel's servant or Yahweh's servant. He is Yahweh. Father, Son, and Spirit bear the name Yahweh. That's God's name, and God is Father, Son, and Spirit. He is co-equal with God, co-eternal with God, same essence. This is the claim he's making. Now, that's going to rile folks up. Either they're going to follow you and worship you as God, or they're going to try to kill you. Because you're dangerous if you're saying things like that, and you're not who you're claiming to be. And so you can pour sort of all that into these little I am sayings that Jesus uses. Now, the thing to do to kind of test what we're talking about is let's see the reaction that people give when he says I am. And it's going to be increasingly strong reaction. But let's just finish up this little story. We were asking the question of identity. Who is he? She's trying to figure out who he is. She's asked, do you think you're greater than our father Jacob? And then in verse 25, the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Jesus says, I am. Just then, verse 27, his disciples arrived, and they were amazed that he was talking with a woman, yet no one said, what do you want, or why are you talking with her? Then the woman left her water jar, went into town, told the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? Now, she's moved from when the Messiah comes, he'll tell us all things, to maybe he is the Messiah. I may have just encountered him at the well. They left the town and made their way to him. Now, verse 39. Now, many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of what the woman said. When she testified, he told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. Many more believed because of what he said, and they told the woman, we no longer believe because of what you said, since we've heard for ourselves and know that this really is the Savior of the world. So we've gone from, you're not greater than Jacob, are you, to, well, when the Messiah comes, he'll tell us all of everything. Maybe he is the Messiah, to, he is the Savior of the world. And at this early stage in Jesus' ministry, it's not simply Israel that's being invited. We see already the movement to the Jew first, but also to the Greeks. And Samaritans are like a middle ground. They're not pure Gentile, they're not pure Jew, but they're that perfect middle ground where you see Jesus already expanding ethnically where this good news is going and who's being invited into the kingdom. So you keep in mind now this little Samaritan encounter because it's going to come into play somewhere else. Now, skip to chapter 6. We're ready for number 2. Now, I can't spend that much time on every I am. Where'd Jeff go? Jeff, I mean, we probably don't want to do this for 2 weeks every night. I couldn't handle it physically, but I think we can do it here. I'll get through a little faster this one. So in chapter 6, this is the 4th and 5th signs that Jesus performs. He feeds 5,000 men, more women and children, with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Famous story. We'll come back and talk about that one a little bit more tomorrow night, because that sort of sets the stage for Jesus saying, I'm the bread of life, in this chapter 6, verse 35. But I'm more interested starting in verse 16. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. Darkness had already set in, but Jesus had not yet come to them. A high wind arose, the sea began to churn, and after they'd rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea. He was coming near the boat, and they were afraid. Now, don't just think of the storm scenes from all the Gospels. Think about this one and the way John is highlighting what's going on here. So he's fed the multitude. His disciples get into the boat. They're crossing the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum. And the wind starts to blow. So you got fishermen here in a boat in a storm. Does it say they're afraid of the storm? Anything about they feared for their lives or anything like that? Now they do in the other, Matthew, Mark, Luke have a similar story, but they highlight different things about it. We want to hear what John wants to highlight about it. And it's a brief story, but fishermen mainly, not all the disciples are fishermen, but quite a few of them, in a boat and in a storm, but it doesn't say they're fearful of the storm. It's just they're out there in the wind and the churning of the sea, and here comes Jesus walking to them. What does it look like they're afraid of? They saw Jesus walking on the sea. He was coming near the boat, and they were afraid. I mean, you don't see somebody just trotting around on the sea like they're going out for exercise. He's just walking out to them. Now, he's done some miraculous things, but walking on the water is something they've not witnessed. And what do you think when you see? He's a ghost. Mark's gospel actually has them thinking he was a ghost. John doesn't say that, though, but he says they were afraid. So what's Jesus going to say to them at that moment? Not, it is I. Boo. You see that? At verse 20, it is I makes no connection to the burning bush or Exodus 32:39 or the suffering servant in Isaiah 40-55. No connection. It is I. But ego eimi. What is it? Tell me. I am. And then don't be afraid. Now look back there to the Isaiah 43. Well, I'll just read it to you. You don't have to flip back there. So this is, we've got an I am here, 2 of them, in verses 10 and 13 of Isaiah 43. But look what precedes those 2 I ams in Isaiah 43. Now this is what the Lord says. The one who created you, Jacob, and the one who formed you, Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overwhelm you. Now that's Isaiah 43, 1 and 2. Look at verse 5. Do not fear, for I am with you. And then in 10 and 13, we get an I am saying. So here's Jesus in a boat with disciples who are fearful. He says to them, I am, do not be afraid. They're going to pass through these waters safely. Now, by walking on the water, he is by action indicating who he is. Who walks on the water? Not me, not you, no human, pure human. Only God can do that. And I even have some passages to back that up. Hang on a second. Job 9:8. These are just some of these Old Testament passages that would say, he's doing what Yahweh does. Job 9:8. Yahweh alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. Psalm 77, starting at verse 16. This is a celebration of the Exodus event. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you. This would be the Red Sea water. It trembled. Even the depths shook. The clouds poured down water. The storm clouds thundered. Your arrows flashed back and forth. The sound of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Lightning lit up the world. The earth shook and quaked. Your way went through the sea and your path through the vast waters, but your footprints were unseen. Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters. Who has authority over the seas? Yahweh. Psalm 89, 8 and 9. Lord God of armies, who is strong like you, Lord? Your faithfulness surrounds you. You rule the raging sea. When its waves surge, you still them. By his action of walking on the water, the ability to calm troubled seas, his action indicates he is Yahweh, but his words confirm it. I am. Do not be afraid. That's the Exodus 3:14, the Deuteronomy 32:39, and those suffering servant passages in Isaiah 40 through 55. It is a statement of his identity, but also that this Yahweh, who is now walking among them, is with them, cares for them, and can say to them, do not be afraid. And 21, then they were willing to take him on board, and at once the boat was at the shore where they were heading. So that's saying number 2. You got your hand out there? Down to number 3. Now we move to chapter 8. This is the third, and there's 3 of them in chapter 8. Actually, there's 4, but the fourth one is an I am with a predicate. At 8:12, it's I am the light of the world. We're not doing that one tonight. We got these 3 just absolute I ams to cover. So it starts, the whole scene here is during the Festival of Tabernacles or Booths. It's one of the 3 pilgrim festivals for Israelites. There's only 3 festivals where they travel to Jerusalem for the festival, according to the law. The first one is Passover. Then 50 days later, they make another trip back for Pentecost. And then the third, now those are both in the spring. In the third, like late September, early October, you have the Festival of Tabernacles or Booths, and it commemorates God's caring for them, preserving them in their wilderness wanderings. So that's the context here. Now, it's in that context, which we'll talk about later at another night, tomorrow night, I think, where Jesus says to them in 8:12, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Now, that's an I am, even though he adds light of the world, so it still counts. It's just not an absolute. But it's the reaction that's going to set up the other 3 I ams in this chapter. Verse 13, so the Pharisees said to him, you're testifying about yourself. Your testimony's not valid. Now think, what's at work where they might say, okay, you're trying to say, I know who you're trying to say you are when you say, I am the light of the world. I know who you're trying to identify yourself with. I know you're trying to say you have this divine identity. But that's just your testimony. And in Jewish law, the testimony of one can't confirm a thing. So they're saying, that's just what you say. And there's numerous Old Testament passages to indicate, like for idolatry, for blasphemy, you had to have the witness of two or more. And then you get that in the New Testament, where two or three are gathered. On the witness of two or three, a thing can be confirmed. They're saying, well, that's just what you say. It's just the testimony of one. Verse 14. Even if I testify about myself, Jesus replied, my testimony is true, because I know where I came from, that is the Father, and I know where I'm going, that is the Father. But you don't know where I come from or where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh or by human standards. I judge no one. Now, he does judge, but not according to the flesh, not from a human standard. Verse 16, and if I do judge, my judgment's true, because it's not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. Even in your law it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is true. That's like Deuteronomy 17:6, Deuteronomy 19. If you want to scribble those would be two texts that say you have to have more than one witness to confirm a thing, both for idolatry and just in court. And then verse 18, I am the one who testifies about myself, and the Father who sent me testifies about me. So Jesus is saying, the Father sent me, I'm testifying, but the Father also testifies about me. So now think about that. You want two witnesses? How about the Father and the Son of the Trinity? That's a pretty good test. I figure if you've got those two testifying on your behalf, the Father and the Son, you're in good shape. But that's what he claims. In verse 19, then they asked, well, where is your Father? Like, well, let him come and let's hear his testimony. And you can hear the mocking in that. Because he's saying God is his Father. And they're saying, well, where is he? Let's hear from him. Now, if they could mean, we had that phrase, according to the flesh, by human point of view. They could be saying, well, your father's just a man. Why don't you have him show up here? Joseph. But Joseph's dead. He's been dead. He's not been the story in a long time. But maybe they're mocking him a little bit. And he's calling God his Father, so to say, well, let your Father come here. They're questioning, God's not your Father. If he is, let him come down here and testify to us right now. They're mocking him. And he says, you know neither my Father nor me. If you knew me, you'd also know my Father. He spoke these words by the treasury while teaching in the temple, but no one seized him because his hour had not yet come. I think I mentioned that in one of the services this morning. There's several times, here we have it, his hour had not yet come. Look, just flip back to chapter 7, verse 30, the chapter before. Then they tried to seize him, yet no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Till it's time, God's not going to allow them to lay a hand on him. It's just not time. His hour's not come. There's other things he's going to do before it's time for the hour when he's going to be crucified. And the most interesting one, keep looking later in chapter 8, verse 59. They picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus was hidden. Now, he didn't run and hide somewhere. That's God hid him from them so they couldn't stone him, because that's not the way. He's not going to die by stoning. That would not atone for the sins of the world. Cursed is the one who hangs on a tree. There was only one way, and that was crucifixion, that could atone for the sins of the world. So he wasn't going to die by stoning. And how would think about that? How that would change at least one thing that another denomination does. he dies on a cross, so you do that. But if he died by stoning, I guess you'd do that. Gosh, where was I? Yeah. So this is like Luke will like this. This is like God puts an invisibility cloak on him, hides him. Now, if you don't like Harry Potter, maybe Lord of the Rings, Frodo's ring. That's more spiritual, I think. Tolkien, people like Tolkien better than Harry Potter. But anyway, that by whatever means, he's hidden from them because his hour hadn't come. And then verse 21, then he said to them again, I'm going away. Now, let me just go back to chapter 7, verse 33. Things are repeated, and sometimes if you hear them earlier, it kind of gives you some insight. So just the earlier chapter 33, then Jesus said, I am only with you for a short time, then I'm going to the one who sent me. The going away is returning to the Father. It entails his death, his resurrection, and his ascension, returning to the Father. You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come. At least not yet. Now, back to 21. So back to 8:21. Then he said to them again, I'm going away. You will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I'm going, you cannot come. Now that's a hard word there. He's going away. You will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I'm going, you cannot come. What did we hear in the sermon this morning in 14? Let not your heart be troubled. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'll come again, and I'm going to take you to that place I'm preparing. Those are his followers, the people who believe that he is the I am, the people who embrace that he is Yahweh. They can go. But these who are committing the cardinal sin of denying his identity, they won't be able to go there. They will die in their sin because they've committed the cardinal sin. So the Jews said again, he won't kill himself, will he? Since he says, where I'm going, you cannot come. So this is another sort of mocking, slanderous way. What's he going to kill himself? Is that how he's going to get somewhere that we can't go? And suicide was really taboo in ancient Jewish culture. So that's like saying, for them, that's like saying, hey, well, he's out of his mind. What, is he out of his mind? Is he going to take his own life? 23. Here's how he responds to that. You are from below. I'm from above. You are of this world. I am not of this world. So he's going to suggest that his identity and origin is with God in heaven. They are identifying themselves as people of this fallen world. World can kind of have a little bit of a different meaning at times as it appears even in John's gospel. Like, for God so loved the world, right? Know that one? John 3:16. But in 1 John 2:15 through 17, love not the world, neither the things in the world. So wait a minute. Are we supposed to love the world or not love the world? Well, it's really not a contradiction. It's a question of what's he mean by world in that particular passage. So the world as God made it, the world that he's in the process of restoring, the world that's going to be a new creation, yes, that's the world he created and that God loves. But the world can sometimes refer to the fallen world, the world in all its worldliness. How about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the arrogance of life? That's how 1 John 2:15 through 17 defines that. It's marked by darkness and death and disobedience to God. He says, that's your identity. And that's why you can't understand what I'm saying and why you won't believe that I am. And then verse 24, therefore I told you that you will die in your sins, for if you do not believe that I am, you will die in your sins. Ding, ding, ding. So there's number 3. So I phrased this one, I am the one from above. Do not die in your sin. If you reject his claim that he is I am, then you will die in your sin. And it's singular the first time, plural the second time, but it doesn't matter. It's referring to the same plight that human beings are in. Because we are sinners, because we sin, because we have sins on our account, we're going to die in those sins and be separated from God. We won't return to our Father's house. So acknowledge who he is, acknowledge his identity, and show that you too are then from above and will experience the presence of God. That's the way this seems to work. Look at verse 25. In light of this, you will die in your sins. Who are you? They question. It's identity. The I ams tell you who he is, but they won't accept it, so they keep asking, just like the woman at the well. Who are you? Are you a prophet? Are you greater than Jacob? Here, who are you? Exactly what I've been telling you from the beginning, Jesus told them. I have many things to say and to judge about you, but the one who sent me is true, and what I've heard from him, these things I tell the world. They did not know he was speaking to them about the Father. So Jesus said to them, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know I am. So this is the second I am. Really close proximity here. So this is number 4. I'll read it again. When you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am. This is not the first time we've had the language of Jesus being lifted up. You remember the little conversation with Nicodemus in John chapter 3? He tells him, you must be born again. And Nicodemus says, well, I'm an old man. I can hardly get out of bed in the morning, up out of bed in the morning. I got to fold myself up and re-enter into my mother's womb. Takes Jesus very literally there. Now, Jesus might have rolled his eyes at that one, because Nicodemus is supposed to know some things. You know, he's a leader among the Pharisees. He might have rolled his eyes at that one. But as that conversation goes on, Jesus uses that language, if I be lifted up. And he refers explicitly, Jesus does, to that scene in Numbers 21. You remember that scene? Numbers 21? Where those Israelites had grumbled and complained about Moses and Aaron and water and food to the point where God was sick of it, and he sent a plague on them of serpents, snakes, and they're biting the people and they're dying. And Moses intercedes to God on their behalf, prays that God stop this plague. And you remember what God told him to do? Lift up a bronzed version of the snake, and those who look upon it will be saved, will survive, will be healed. Now that's one of the most mind-blowing fixes or solutions to a problem. Look at the very thing that's killing you, and you be healed. It's like this like cures like principle that's true in a lot of arenas. Like, I know vaccines are a little controversial these days. I hope the flu vaccine is not controversial. I get mine, I'm first in line. And I'd go get a second one later in the year for fear that the first one's worn off. I'm a believer in the flu vaccine. Always, I got the flu. I can tell you where it started for me. I didn't even think about flu vaccines. I didn't worry about them when I was young. And I was at OBU, and I was early in my time here, and a young man named Hans Dilbeck was a pastor at First Baptist Ponca City, and he'd invited me to do January Bible study at First Baptist Ponca City. And I was Saturday night getting ready to go. I mean, this was a big deal for me at that time. I mean, churches didn't know who I was. They weren't calling me to come and do January Bible studies. But my friend Hans Dilbeck that I met on my first day of seminary, we sat next to each other and kind of got to be friends. He was the pastor there, and he'd invited me to come up. So it's Saturday night. Angie and I are watching Kentucky Vanderbilt on a Saturday night basketball game. And you ever had if you've had the flu before, you know, it doesn't come on slowly. It hits you like a punch in the face. And then over about a 30-minute time, I just went from feeling good to feeling like I'd been hit with a ton of bricks. I mean, I was aching, I was fever, sweating, I felt terrible. I knew there's no shot I'm going to be able to go to Ponca City in the morning. It was one of the hardest calls I ever made to call Hans and say, I'm sick, buddy. I'm not going to be able to do it. Now, he was gracious about it. And that's happened very rarely in my 28 plus years here. But I made a promise to my wife that night as I felt so bad about that. I'm going to start getting the flu shot. If there's a possibility that it will help me not have to make that call again, I'm going to get the flu shot. And as I stand before you, that was probably 98, 99, something like that. As I stand before you today, I have kept that pledge. And I'm vaccinated this year. And I did have COVID, but that's another animal. But I think I've avoided the regular flu pretty well over that period of time. But do you know that flu vaccine? You know what's in that vaccine? Now, they may have come up with new things, but the vaccine as I first knew it. What's in that vaccine that protects you against the flu? It's a dead flu virus is in that vaccine. The thing that makes you sick is the thing that if engineered properly can keep you from being sick. If you were to step on a copperhead, they're probably not out right now, but as the weather warms, you step on a copperhead, you're barefoot, and you go to the hospital, they might give you that antivenom, and you know what's in that? Poison from a snake. That's why they handle these things and milk them to get that venom so they can make the antivenom. Like cures like. Well, these snakes are killing them, so bronze one and hold it up, and if they look at it, they'll be healed. Now, what's that have to do with Jesus? Saying it's like Moses in the wilderness. If I be lifted up like the bronze serpent. What's the thing? What's our problem? Sin. And what's sin do to us? What are the wages of our sin? Death. So how can we avoid this plague? By Jesus being lifted up, crucified. By seeing his death, we can be saved from our eternal death. Like cures like. That's the picture of if I be lifted up. It goes along with the bronze serpent being lifted up in the wilderness and saving the Israelites from the plague that was coming upon them. That's the language here when you lift up the Son of Man. Now that's a gospel word there, lifted up. If you're looking, it's one word in Greek. It takes us two words in English to say lifted up, but it's one word in Greek. But if you wanted to try to capture the gospel maybe in a word, lifted up's a good one. And it has two meanings. Like if you didn't know the full Jesus story and you just heard him say, if I be lifted up, you would think it means to be exalted. Like if you exalt me, if you lift me up in the sense of exalting, then I'll draw all men to myself. If you honor me, if you worship me, if you lift me up. But lifted up is going to be execution, crucifixion. But in John, that is his glory. He is being exalted when he's lifted up on a cross because that's the Father's plan. That's the means of salvation. And that cures our disease. So in that one word has both crucifixion and glory. It's a good gospel word. When you lift up the Son of Man, you will know that I am. Now, how would they know by him being crucified? What would that do for them knowing that he is Yahweh, that they would recognize somehow who his true identity? by seeing him lifted up on a cross? Well, maybe they're just reading their Old Testament, and by seeing the way he's crucified and the things that happen, they can make connections to the Old Testament. Maybe when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? They see Psalm 22:1, which he quotes that there, and maybe they put together, this is the righteous sufferer from Psalm 22. Or maybe they think Isaiah 53, this lamb that's slaughtered, who's bruised for our transgressions. You could see in the way Jesus dies in Isaiah 53 and say, boy, that looks like what the prophet described. Zechariah chapter 12 uses the language of him being pierced. And John actually quotes that in John chapter 19, verse 37. He quotes that Zechariah 12:10 of he was pierced for our transgressions. So maybe you could put together those pieces. I know this. In Mark 15:39, there's a Roman centurion who watches him die and says, surely this man was the Son of God. So surely an Israelite might be able to identify him if a Roman centurion could. But by whatever means, he says, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know I am, and that I do nothing on my own. Now, at verse 30, as he was saying these things, many believed in him. I'm going to skip now, just verse 33. We are descendants of Abraham, they answered him. We've never been enslaved to anyone. How can you say you will set us free? Man, I would love to say to them, what do you mean you've never been enslaved by anyone? That's the story of your nation. I've already mentioned the Assyrians in 722, the Babylonians in 586, then the Persians beat the Babylonians, then they're under Persian rule, then the Greeks, Alexander the Great defeats the Persians, then they're under Greek rule. They continue under Greek rule until they break away for one period of 100 years under the Maccabees, and then they're under Roman rule. At the very time they're saying we've never been enslaved, they're under Roman rule, paying taxes to Rome. I mean, you don't need to be set free? Obviously, they're not thinking politically. They're probably meaning we've never bowed our knee to any of these nations or their gods, which would be an overstatement, I think. But I think I get what they're saying. They would say, we are descendants of Abraham, and we are his free descendants, not slaves. Jesus responded, verse 34, truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave of sin. A slave doesn't remain in the household forever, but a son does remain forever. So if the son sets you free, you really will be free. I know you're descendants of Abraham. Now he's talking ethnically there. But you're trying to kill me because my word has no place among you. I speak what I've seen in the presence of my Father, so then you do what you have heard from your father. He's suggesting now, because of their actions, because of their deeds, they're demonstrating they're not truly children of Abraham. He's moving beyond just ethnicity. He's moving to a principle that children act like their parents. So if you do what is right, that would indicate that Abraham is your father. But if you want to kill the Messiah, that would indicate Abraham is not your father by your actions. 39. Our father is Abraham, they replied. If you were Abraham's children, Jesus told them, you would do what Abraham did, which was obey God. That's what Abraham did. He obeyed God. Also in Genesis 18, he received God and his angelic messengers with him. They're not receiving Yahweh, they're rejecting him here. He says, but now you're trying to kill me, a man who's told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You're doing what your father does. Now, by suggesting Abraham's not their father, he's suggesting that maybe they're not true Jews. They're impure. Maybe there's some of that Assyrian blood. Maybe they're like the Samaritans. They're not pure Israelites. They answer. They get it. We weren't born of sexual immorality, they said. We have one Father, God. So they're focusing, more on ethnicity. he on spiritual heritage. And Jesus said to them, if God were your Father, you'd love me because I came from God and I'm here. For I didn't come on my own, but he sent me. Why don't you understand what I say? Because you cannot listen to my word. You are of your father, the devil. This isn't going to go well. They're not going to take that very well. So in their minds, he's accused them of not being true Jews. And now he's accusing them of being from the devil. And you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning. Now this same author, John, in 1 John chapter 3, verse 12 says, Cain was of the evil one and murdered his brother Abel. Why? Because his deeds were evil. And so this author, in his letter, 1 John, makes the connection between Cain murdering his brother and the devil. And he's making that connection here. Jesus is that connection of the devil with these who are rejecting him. He says, when he tells a lie, he speaks from his own nature because he's a liar. Now, Genesis 4 is the story of Cain and Abel. Genesis 3 is where he lies to Eve. You won't surely die. He's trying to keep something good from you, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So I think it's clear to me Jesus has Genesis 3 and 4 in mind when he's characterizing them as being from their father, the devil, a murderer, and a liar. Now let's go down to 48. The Jews responded to him, aren't we right in saying, you are a Samaritan? You want to get nasty with us? You want to suggest Abraham's not our father? Well, we will just make a charge against you. Aren't you a Samaritan? Now, they don't explain why they would make that charge, but that's like a low blow in their mind. Now, there's a lot of talk, and you can see it in a lot of Jewish sources that reject Jesus as Messiah, that a lot of his opponents made things up from the story of a virginal conception. People who didn't believe who he was didn't accept that his mother conceived as a virgin. They would say, we might not be that smart, but we know where babies come from. And Mary must have been immoral. Maybe she had a fling, or maybe she was raped, or something happened. She just made up that story. And occasionally you'll see some of these stories in some of the Jewish writings that maybe the father of Jesus was a Samaritan. You can imagine why they'd say that. That's like a low blow. So maybe they're playing off of that. One of those stories that's in the Babylonian Talmud, which is sometime after the events of Jesus' life, but suggests even the name of a Roman military person who raped Mary, and his name was Panthera. Now it's interesting, the word for virgin is Parthenos. So it's real close. It's like a play off of the word for virgin. They made up a name of a Roman soldier to suggest immorality. So I'm not surprised here that they would say you're a Samaritan. They're making that charge. Could have come from, didn't he have pretty good luck with the Samaritans? Back in chapter 4, many Samaritans believed. He stayed there a couple of days. They might you seem to get along pretty well with the Samaritans. Maybe you're one of them. Or maybe they said, maybe they'd heard some of his other stories, like the parable of the Good Samaritan or the parable of the 10 lepers, and 10 were healed and only one came back and expressed gratitude, and he was a Samaritan. So maybe all this feeds into them saying, hey, you're a Samaritan. What are you saying about us? And then you have a demon. He'd said, you're of your father the devil. They accuse him of having a demon. He's had that charge before. In Mark 3, they say, you're what are you, the prince of demons? He says, I cast out demons. How could I be the prince of demons? He says in 49, he doesn't even answer the Samaritan charge. He just says, I do not have a demon. On the contrary, I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it and judges. Truly I tell you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. Then the Jews said, now we know you have a demon. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. You say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. So Abraham died, the prophets died, so they must not have kept your word. Now we know you have a demon. Verse 54, if I glorify myself, Jesus answered, my glory is nothing. My Father, about whom you say, he's our God, he's the one who glorifies me. The God you claim, the God that he's claiming as Father, they by rejecting him, they're rejecting the true God. 55, you do not know him, but I know him. If I were to say I don't know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. And no explanation here. But Paul says in Galatians 3:8 that the gospel was preached to Abraham in advance. And he quotes out what it is. Through you, all the nations will be blessed. I could see how Abraham could look forward to the day when his descendant, Abraham knew he wasn't the one, but it would be one of his descendants. I would think that's probably most likely it. But we've got prophets who rejoiced for the coming of this day. Isaiah, we just came out of Christmas, Isaiah 9, 1 and 2. The people were walking in darkness, and they saw a great light. And then he goes on in Isaiah 9, talks about a child being born. Looks like Isaiah was rejoicing to see that day. Well, why would he have more insight than Abraham? But whatever he means, that's what he says. 57, the Jews replied, you aren't even 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham? Or I guess better, Abraham's seen you? There's the setup. So Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am. Now think, how would you expect Jesus to have said that? If that were just me answering that, like if I'm trying to give that answer, here's how I would have said it. Before Abraham was, I was. That'd be the natural way to say it. Not before Abraham was, I was. Before Abraham was, I am. He's claiming pre-existence. He's claiming connection with Yahweh. He's claiming divine identity. All that. Look at their response. So they picked up stones to throw at him. Now, they don't pick up stones then, or I don't guess now, for people who claim to be Messiah that they don't think is Messiah. That doesn't get you stoned. Blasphemy is why they pick up stones. Leviticus 24 says, if a person is a blasphemer, they deserve to die. They're to be dragged outside the city gate and stoned to death. When they pick up stones, they're saying, you're a blasphemer. What would cause them to think he's a blasphemer? They know when he says, before Abraham was, I am, that he's claiming to be Yahweh. That's blasphemy if you don't believe he's Yahweh. So they pick up stones to throw at him. This is at the heart of these I ams are claims that he is Yahweh. And boy, when he says it here, they really get it. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus was hidden. That's the invisibility cloak. By whatever means, God is they're not going to be able to kill him there. And went out of the temple. Now, that could just be Jesus leaving the place where it was hot, where the trouble was. But what's become clear is he is Yahweh. The very glory of God is evident in him. The very presence of God is wherever he is. The temple's supposed to be the place where the glory of God dwells. Like Exodus 40, when they built the tabernacle and that cloud fills it. And the glory of the Lord filled the place, and the priests couldn't even stand up. They fell down at the cloud coming to dwell, the presence of God in that place. That's what made that a place where their sacrifices could be accepted. And then when Solomon builds the temple, the same thing, that cloud fills the place. That's why it's a place where you can make sacrifices for the atonement of your sin. That's where the glory of God is. But now, where's the glory of God? In John 8, where's the glory of God now? Is it in a physical location like the temple, or is it in the very person of Jesus? Where's the glory of God now? He's replacing the temple. You won't take your sacrifices, or you don't need to anymore, once he dies on the cross. He's a one-time for all-time sacrifice. You want to access the presence of God, you go to him, not a physical location, not one place in Jerusalem. So we've got the glory of God that's supposed to be present in the temple, but the glory of God can leave the temple, and it did in the prophet Ezekiel talks about. Because of their disobedience, the glory of God, it hesitates, like it lifts up above the cherubim. You read the first 10 chapters of Isaiah. The glory of God, the kabod, sort of goes above the cherubim and just sort of sits at looking out towards the east. Like not leaving yet, but thinking about it. In chapter 11, it finally departs. You know what that word is? Ichabod. It's one of the ugliest words in any language I know. Ichabod. I mean, ick. Abod. It's a terrible word. It means no glory, without glory. Isaiah promises, now all the first 11 chapters of Isaiah about the glory leaving, but promises that the glory will return once again to the temple, like Isaiah 43. When Jesus walked into the temple, the glory had returned. There it was, in him. He's teaching them there, and what do? They reject him. And what does he do? What's it say he does? He departed from the temple. What departs from the temple when he leaves the temple? The glory of God. It's like Ichabod. Or he could have just left because it was hot. But I think you know what I think. I think there's a lot packed into that little and went out of the temple. Well, it's 6:55. Can you believe that? I mean, it feels like it's been 30 minutes to me. But you're ready to go. And I'm going to do what I never do with my students. I'm going to let you out early. Reed? Huh? Does that seem right? How many times I let you out early of a class? Never? That's probably not true, but not many times. Surely I was sick one day or something and let you go early. Never. Flu shot, that's right. Good one, Reed. Good one. Jeff, we finished? You want me just to? All right, let me ask a blessing on you and we'll be dismissed. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen. See ya. I didn't hear one amen.